Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're going to break down exactly how HTTP2 solves the massive inefficiencies of older web protocols. If you've ever stopped and wondered just how the modern web handles such insane amounts of data so quickly, well, you are in exactly the right place. We're about to look right under the hood at the architectural leaps that literally make today's digital experiences possible. Let's get right into it.
Here's our roadmap for this explainer. We'll start with the HTTP/1.1 header problem, move into the HPACK header compression engine, and then discuss the reality of server push. After that, we'll cover ALPN and connection control, dive into gRPC and the connection lifecycle, and finally wrap up with the overall HTTP/2 performance leap.
All right, part 1, the HTTP/1.1 header problem. Picture this. Your browser needs to load, say, 100 image assets for just one single web page. Under the old sequential request-response model of HTTP/1.1, this creates a massive performance bottleneck. Back then, if you wanted to achieve application layer concurrency, browsers were literally forced to open multiple parallel TCP connections. And honestly, that was an incredibly resource-intensive strategy. It increased handshake overhead and just completely choked overall network performance.
But you know what's truly wild about this? Sending the exact same multi-100-byte text strings repeatedly gives the server absolutely zero new information. Think about it. Across those 100 image requests, your browser is sending the exact same user agent, the exact same accept headers, and the exact same massive authorization or cookie strings just over and over again. It's just wildly redundant.
To put that into perspective, when you pair a tiny, let's say 20-byte API response with 400 to 600 bytes of repetitive header data, that overhead accounts for over 95% of the transmitted data. 95%! That severely congests the network and, frankly, screams for a compression solution. All this redundancy just fills up the initial TCP congestion window and introduces entirely unnecessary latency.
So, moving on to part 2. The HPACK header compression engine.
So, how exactly do we fix this glaring issue? Well, enter HPACK. Now, HPACK isn't just your basic run-of-the-mill compression. Instead, it replaces those repeated header values with highly compact indexed representations. And crucially, it does this while maintaining strict security. It actively resists vulnerabilities like the crime attack, which is a nasty exploit that targets pattern recognition in general-purpose compression. To beat that, HPACK utilizes secure, specialized Huffman encoding.
Taking a look at the high-level flow, we basically see a transition from bulky text strings to lightning-fast binary execution. It's pretty elegant. Instead of repeatedly blasting out full text strings, the protocol stores these headers in a shared state table on both endpoints. So from then on out, it just transmits a super compact reference index.
It helps to think of the static table like a restaurant's pre-printed menu. It's a hard-coded dictionary of 61 common headers, like your standard GET methods, baked into every implementation. Then you have the dynamic table. Think of that like a whiteboard for today's specials, entirely unique to your active session. This dynamic space adapts in real time, safely evicting the oldest entries if its 4096-byte memory limit fills up.
In practice, what this actually means is that instead of parsing raw text and hunting around for delimiters like carriage returns, the server just reads a few simple integer indices. So the whole string get just becomes an index of 2. A massive, clunky custom cookie, that just becomes an index of 62. This whole transformation from human-readable text to a streamlined binary framing layer is just incredibly powerful.
Ultimately, the benefits of HPACK radically transform efficiency, especially for workloads that rely on thousands of small, rapid-fire requests. Because HTTP/2 utilizes fixed 9-byte frame headers for this binary parsing, it enables vastly superior memory allocation. If you think about your smartphone's battery life and processing power, this shift away from heavy text parsing is an absolute game changer.
All right, let's head into part 3, the reality of server push.
Normally, web communication always starts with a client request, right? Well, server push totally flipped the script. It was introduced as an anticipatory computing feature. The whole goal was to basically outrun network round-trip time by sending you what you need before you even explicitly know you need it.
In theory, this sounds amazing, because the server already knows the web page is going to require certain assets. Pushing them immediately should reduce latency. So you ask for the HTML file, and the server says, hey, I know for sure you're going to need this CSS and JavaScript in about a millisecond, so I'm just sending them right now.
Yeah, it was a fantastic idea in theory, but in practice, it actually became pretty counterproductive. In fact, major browser engines like Chromium have actually deprecated this feature. Why? Because it constantly resulted in inefficient overpushing. Servers were proactively pushing resources the browsers already had safely stored in their local cache. That meant push data was just needlessly competing for bandwidth with the critical stuff the browser was actually trying to request.
Moving on to Part 4, ALPN and connection control.
So we need to talk about the application layer protocol negotiation, or ALPN, flow. This is super important because by integrating the protocol selection directly into the secure TLS handshake, both the client and server can agree to use HTTP/2 completely transparently. By doing it this way, we eliminate an entire round trip of latency before the application even starts doing its job. And once ALPN establishes those base rules, it hands everything off to what I like to call a robust control room of frames. We've got the settings frame for exchanging startup parameters like your maximum concurrent streams. We've got the ping frame, which acts as a protocol layer heartbeat to measure latency and test connection health, which is way more reliable than basic TCP keep-alives, by the way. And finally, the go-away frame, which kicks off a graceful shutdown. It stops new streams, but safely lets the active ones finish up without just abruptly killing the connection.
Next up, Part 5, gRPC and the connection lifecycle. If you're building or using modern microservices today, you're almost certainly relying on gRPC. And the thing is, gRPC fundamentally requires HTTP2's binary framing to even function. It heavily leverages multiplexing to handle high-performance, bidirectional streaming and RPC calls. Honestly, without these specific HTTP2 mechanics like robust flow control and HPACK header compression, the immense efficiency of modern microservice architectures just wouldn't be possible. When looking at the complete connection lifecycle timeline, you really want to pay special attention to Step 3, the connection preface. This step acts as a really crucial sanity check. It uses a very specific 24-octet string that ensures older HTTP/1.1 servers, which totally can't parse it, will just fail cleanly. It prevents them from getting confused and trying to read binary frames as standard plain text.
Finally, we arrive at Part 6, the HTTP/2 performance leap.
To really summarize this massive leap from HTTP/1.1 to HTTP/2, we've dramatically reduced overhead and latency across the board. We took old, sequential text scanning and completely replaced it with multiplexed, stateful binary framing. We basically moved from a highly redundant sequential past to a streamlined, highly concurrent present, and that is exactly what enables the low-latency, real-time digital experiences we literally all just expect today. I really hope this explainer has helped clarify the precise, under-the-hood mechanics of HTTP/2 for you. But it does leave us with a pretty fascinating question to ponder. Since HTTP/2 still suffers from TCP-level head-of-line blocking, meaning a single dropped TCP packet still stalls the entire connection, how exactly will HTTP/3 and QUIC continue this evolution of efficiency? Well, the pursuit of perfect performance never truly ends, does it? Thanks so much for learning with me today, and keep exploring.